I firmly believe that when any area of our lives goes into crisis, we must examine the relationship we have with that thing, place, or person to restore the balance that fuels recovery and prosperity. My name is Chengi. I am the founder of the Black Swan Relationship Academy, dating and relationship expert, life coach, mother, sister, auntie, to every single one of the Black Swans in the world that need me to be that for them. For dating and relationship advice, follow Black Swan Relationship Academy on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Welcome, Black Swan. Let's glide into today's lake and swim.
So, I really want to speak to us today about unlearning, the mechanics of unlearning, the value of unlearning, and hopefully, we're going to get into how to actually unlearn consciously. The reason this is so important is in my several years of being a coach and expert in helping thousands of women across the world, is what we need to unlearn is more important than what we need to learn. And here's an example. If you build on faulty foundations, it doesn't matter what the quality of the materials you use are, whether you build a castle made of gold walls. If the foundation is mashed potatoes, just to be extreme for the purposes of this exercise, it's all going to fold in. It's not going to be able to hold up. And I believe that we are in a time and a season in this century and in this modern time where we're going through such massive transitions that are so fundamental and so foundational that we're being shaken from the inside. And the two positions we can take is to hold fast to what we know, what is familiar. Regardless of whether it works, we can choose safety to hide and say, okay, look, this is what I know. This is what has been true and held true for generations, for me, for my family. And just really kind of hide in that cave and be washed away by the waves of this world and become relics and irrelevant to our culture and to our time. Or we bravely choose to step out and say, okay, there's a scripture that I love when Jesus says, come as a child. I really love that. I believe that in every dispensation, in every transition, the greater wisdom is to approach it with more curiosity, intrigue, open heartedness, and wonder. And that only comes when we can feel safe even in the uncomfortable and in uncertainty. And I truly believe that the leaders of every generation are the ones that have mastered the ability to find comfort in uncertainty and to find meaning in times that seem confusing and venture out into open waters. And I believe truly that God is in the open waters and he creates that discomfort within our safety zones so that we can see greater dimensions and bigger dimensions of him in open waters. And so I have found that we have basically two enemies in transformation and in adaptation in ways that are healthy and create the results that we are after. One is complete ignorance. We have no idea what is going on, what is the truth about anything, because we live in a world that has an unhealthy relationship with the truth. And that has an unhealthy relationship with honesty. We know that from the people that stir up the waters and the kind of anger towards people that say things that uncomfortable to the masses. We live in a world where if you do not approve of me as I am, then you do not accept me. And I love what Dr. Pat Allen says is, to love is to accept and to like is to approve. And we don't have to approve the people that we accept, but we do live in a world where if you truly accept me, then you have to approve of me, my lifestyle, my choices. And as a result, there is pressure for us to shift our belief systems and change our narratives to suit every single person we meet, and to approve instead of simply accept. But I don't want to go on a tangent. We can discuss that maybe a little bit later. But the second enemy from ignorance is actually what we think we know. I heard a man once say, and I don't remember exactly who he was, but I believe he said something to this effect, that there's something more dangerous than ignorance, and that is a person who doesn't know enough, who knows little about something. Knowing things partially, or knowing little, or having knowledge of a subject matter and not really understanding it. I love the scripture that says, in all you're getting, get understanding. And this is really about a call to greater expression, greater understanding, because I truly believe that balance is found in understanding. I believe that God seeks balance, desires balance above everything else. And so we have a generation that knows a little about everything. And that too can be very dangerous. And I was very much a part of that, sort of matrix. And the best way to build anything new is to dismantle what we do know, the little we know, instead of adding more information to the brokenness and the little we know and the incomplete stories we have and the blurred pictures of what we believe to be true. It's often best to completely dismantle what we know and go back to the drawing board and think, okay, these are some of the things that I really need to unlearn, and be okay with that. Be okay with being a forever student. And I believe that to truly grow and to unlearn, and to grow in and dispel ignorance from our lives, we do have to be eternal students. We have to stop believing that we have the absolute truth on anything. And even if we do have the absolute truth in terms of God's word, we don't always have the right interpretation of the truth as it was delivered and meant. And so I believe that to grow in the area of life, love, business, faith, money, we really have to begin to do a lot of unlearning. And boy, oh boy, have I spent several years unlearning a lot of stuff. And personally, I find it completely fulfilling. I find the journey of unraveling and dismantling and re-looking at my world and shifting paradigms about the things I believe. I find that incredibly arousing, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. I get excited about the possibility that what I have known to date may not be the full story, the whole story, or even the right story. And that came from a personal journey of complete, I built my world very much on the reality of being raised, having an encounter with Christ as a child, that was so real and so true to me. And as a result, shaped where I would go and who I would be. And I was very deeply drawn to the church and deeply drawn to the Bible. And so I built my whole young life around the narrative of the Bible and the interpretations that I was given. And honestly, I was so very proud of myself when I was 18 and I ticked every single box. I really felt like the perfect Christian and just having the perfect narrative, and was so haughty about the sense that I really didn't need grace to make heaven. I just got this thing right. I ticked every box until I built my world on that knowledge, on that belief, on that foundation. And 13 years later, when I was 33, my whole world shattered. I mean, to complete pieces. And I had to really examine everything that I knew, because I felt there was a part of me that needed the familiar. And we're going to talk about that a little bit further as we go through this unlearning series. And we're going to be touching on unlearning our money habits. We're going to talk about unlearning our faith habits, some of the information we've been given in spiritual circles and in religious circles. We're going to talk about some of the things we've learned about money that we definitely need to unlearn if we're ever going to make money, keep money, and grow money. And we're going to touch on it from so many different aspects of life, because this is the Black Swan Life. This is really an extension of my work when it comes to relationships, but I'm expanding the bandwidth in this podcast because I want us to recognize that how you do one thing is how you do everything. I want you to know that, I help people with every aspect of their lives, and often it doesn't matter which doorway, which gateway they come to me on. Mainly it's relationships, because those tend to be the most painful and transformative doorways in which we can come into your life and really begin to help you see things from a completely different perspective and change all of your relationship. But the work that I've done in the years has made me realize, even though I'm a certified performance and business coach and a life coach, I see that, everything is related. And I have learned over the years that everything is really about relationships. The relationship we have with money, the relationship we have with God, the church, whatever your religion is, the relationship you have with spirituality, the relationship we have with one another, with our children, the relationship we have romantically. Usually when we are seeing problems in those areas, or lack of achievement in those areas, or lack of progress in those areas, or vice versa, it is often because it's a relationship problem. We have beliefs that underpin that problem. We have mindsets that make it impossible to have a good and healthy relationship with those entities. And so I have really truly come to believe that life is really about relationship, and relationship is life. And I believe that the reason we don't see it that way is because we do not believe that we can have a relationship with inanimate objects, that relationships can only be real if they're between humans and animals. But actually, we can have a relationship with things and places and situations and circumstances that don't actually have a voice that we can translate in any language. But I truly believe that everything does have a voice. I believe that we just need to learn to hear the voice of the ocean, and the voice of the trees, and the voice of the mountains, and the voice of money, if we pay attention and we know how to listen. And we're going to be doing that in the next few series. I've also recorded some series with my coaches, and they will be on here giving their perspective as well, because I know they've got so much to contribute. And we'll have some guests as well come and help us out with this conversation. But I just want to give you some pointers on how we can really move the needle when it comes to unlearning, and hopefully explain to you further as we go on why it is so crucial to unlearn, why it's so crucial to dismantle one thought in order to build one. And I believe there's a scripture in the Bible that says, in order to build on something, you must tear down the old. And when you look through so many examples of Gideon, and when he was about to win a battle for God, he had to tear down certain altars. And we can go over and over through scripture and find that the dismantling of certain principles have to sometimes happen before we can build something more robust. And I truly believe that we are a generation that actually needs to build something robust, and we need to come out of our caves and stop standing in the areas of our extremities, and really kind of find a way to exist as humans, first and foremost, to show love and to create something superior. to become a beacon of light, because I truly believe that when Christ said, you are a city that is set upon a hill, a beacon of light, you are the light of the world. It's really about superiority in terms of having a mindset that lights up the rest of the world rather than a superiority complex, but really having something that is superior to what is, superior to extremities, superior to politics. And that is really you living a light-filled life that lights the path not only for yourself, but for others and those coming after you and those who are in darkness. So let's really think about why we need to unlearn. The reason we need to unlearn is because when something truer, better, more superior is represented to you, and you are holding a belief, a thought pattern, a mindset that needs to be dismantled, you're going to experience this sense of triggering. You're going to be deeply, deeply triggered because and triggers are really unpleasant. They build up anxiety in us. They make us feel terribly unsafe and often put us into fight, flight, or freeze mode, which puts so much stress on our nervous system. Whenever we are triggered, it means that there is an explosive, and I love Gabor Mate's kind of explanation of this. He's an incredible guy, and he talks about the fact that if you see a trigger, it means there's an explosive. A trigger is usually on a gun, a trigger is usually on a bomb. So often when we're triggered, it means that beyond and underneath that trigger is a bomb, is something brewing. And one day it will explode, and you will implode or explode, and it will not be at a time that is convenient or in a way that is helpful to you. And I believe that in this season of great pressure, what we cannot afford to do is ignore our triggers. We cannot afford to ignore triggers, nor be impatient or angry at people who do trigger us, because they are sent to help us out. And this is one of the things that we do need to unlearn, that when somebody comes into your life or people in your life constantly trigger you, that is God's way of saying, hey, look, you've got explosives here that we need to deal with. You've got something brewing, and it is either holding you back. It is either going to stop you from moving forward. It's going to wait for an opportune time when you're on top of the world, and it's going to explode. And we've seen that. We've seen people rise to the top, and we've seen them totally dismantle and unravel in front of all of us, because they had all of these triggers, that they had all of these wounds and all of these things that they hadn't dealt with. And so they ruined their careers, they ruined their name, they ruined their reputations. And what's really weird about this world is, and the truth about this world is, you can spend a whole lifetime building your reputation, and in one moment, one explosive moment, you can find yourself on the scrap heap, losing so much so fast that you couldn't possibly imagine. So we certainly cannot entertain triggers. We have to pay attention to those things. And often we're triggered because we have a belief system that is not serving us in that moment. Now, fair enough, there are some triggers that are healthy, hearing about abuse of animals or children or whatever you're passionate about, about the things that we need to protect and cherish, it does trigger in me when I hear about any abuse to children. I happen to have a soft spot for children. It really, I kind of even have nightmares. That in my nightmares are made of people abusing children. And so for me, of course, if I hear of it, it's right for me to be triggered and to want to be compelled to do something and to say stop and to serve and to help. So yes, triggers are there for a reason, to let us know that something is wrong. And so we need to really explore what is wrong. We need to be safe enough. And, as I was exploring this, I got to a place where I was paralyzed by this trigger of children being abused, and it almost became paralyzing, and I couldn't stop the nightmares I was having at night, until I realized that it was really about me and some of the abuse that I'd taken in childhood that I hadn't processed. And so it was really about me protecting myself and crying for myself and feeling for myself, but not knowing, because I'd actually buried certain memories of abuse that I'd actually been through. And they had sort of surfaced, and I realized, oh my gosh, I am crying for myself, I'm weeping for myself. And yes, I still get triggered when I hear about children being abused, but now I'm no longer enslaved to the feeling. I can process it, and I can actually go into action to be useful when it comes to triggers. And so, it's really about, what is it? What's the explosive? What's going on? What do I need to heal? What do I need to fix? What do I need to make right? What do I need to process? What do I need to ask for help with? And so we can't learn anything if we're constantly exploding. And I know one of the things that really triggers us all in the 21st century, or a lot of people, is the same thing that triggered me. When I first heard about the femininity, what femininity was, is something that I explored several years ago, and there was so little information, and the rest of the information had to do, with woo-woo spirituality, is what I call it. It's not particularly a particular brand of spirituality, but that whole kind of woo-woo, the divine feminine or whatever. And, people kind of doing crazy things and crazy dances. I was just like, I can't participate in that. But when I sort of really kind of came across Dr. Pat Allen's work, it was very riveting. It took a long time for my mind to get rounded and to form my own opinions about femininity, and feel free and open and comfortable to listen to different people from different places and really gather and make up my own mind. But I first had to dismantle my very strong feminist views. I had to really realize that I was not going to be able to be feminine while still holding feminist views. And those of you who know me know that I really appreciate the first wave of feminism and the intent behind feminism when it sort of began. And I'm grateful, truly grateful to what feminists were able to really do for me as a woman, and the opportunities they were able to give me. And if you know me even better and you follow me on Black Swan Relationship Academy, which you follow me for a long time, you will know that my father was a hardcore feminist. My mom was a hardcore feminist. We were raised very much as feminists, and that was fantastic. It's responsible for making me the woman that I am today, and my sisters the accomplished women that they are today, as we were really raised, with good feminist views of being empowered, capable, and being unstoppable, and all these wonderful things that we can be now as women. But I have seen feminism become toxic and vile and man-hating, and I was sort of going down that spiral until I really kind of had what I call an awakening, a moment where you hit a wall in an area that means the world to you. And for me, creating a family and being married was my everything. And so when I found that I couldn't make it happen regardless of how much I tried, how attractive I was, or how much money or lack thereof, or how sweet and caring and loving I was as a woman, there was something that was missing. And so it sent me on this quest to understand. And I read and researched and listened and poured. And anyone who knows me, my best friend will tell you that I literally am like a sponge. I obsess over. I'm like a mad scientist. I'll close myself in and lock myself in until I get to the bottom of it. I will read a million books if I have to get to the bottom of something, because that's just how I'm wired. So I went on this quest to understand, because my brain doesn't like things I do not understand. And I kept kind of coming into this knowledge of femininity, but I just didn't know how to make it work with my man-hating views. And I remember prior to all of that, when I was still married and my world was still, in inverted commas, perfect, I remember having a session with a life coach, and I was sharing with her about some of my pains and with men, and she asked me a lot of questions, and at the end she said, well, you hate men. And I was flabbergasted, because I was convinced that I actually really, really loved them. I only had male friends growing up in school. My father was my bestie. And my whole entire life, men had always been the ones to accept me, to love me. So I had a really great relationship with men, but I also had this other parallel thought where men were responsible for the pain and suffering of women. Men were responsible for everything that could possibly go wrong, and they needed to be managed and kept in their place. And these are all views that I had learned from, kind of being a feminist and absorbing information. And as you know, when I do something, I do it 110%. So I was well in there. So I had to really look at myself and think, okay, it resonated, it triggered me. I was very upset when she said it. I was, really annoyed. But being the introspective human that I've always been, even since I was a child, I had to really go home and examine that and think, what the hell did she mean? And it didn't really make sense much until I really started to understand the feminine and masculine dynamic in the way that I do. And I believe that I understanding it at a much deeper level than what is available in the kind of digital space. And I'm very fortunate because, again, my obsession. So basically, I had to really dismantle some of my beliefs. I had to unlearn a lot of things that I held true, that I know many of you and many women in the world hold true to a point where they would give up their lives for this thing to be true. But I really had to dismantle that, and it was very, very painful. And that's one thing I want you to know and understand, that unlearning is painful. It's painful to the mind because it creates a deep sense of insecurity. We feel safe with the familiar. The subconscious mind's protocol is to make sure that we stay in the familiar, because the familiar is what the mind believes is safety. And so when we start to dismantle what is familiar and leave ourselves with a new thought, the brain is going to reject that, and that rejection is going to manifest itself in feelings of anger, in feelings of feeling disrupted, unsafe. We're going to get into survival mode because there is this new information that is asking us to surrender all of that other information. And of course, having a son and watching this beautiful soul in my hands become and evolve into a man, I realized there's no way that men were born evil. They were born beautiful and pure. And surely my son cannot be weighed by the beliefs that I hold about men. So becoming a boy mom was also fundamental and important, because I wanted him to I was raising a gentleman. I was raising a man of stature, a man of honor, a man that respected and loved women. And I didn't want him to suffer at the rhetoric that I had absorbed. And so with all of that, I had to weigh up, I had to go through that pain. And learning is painful, it's difficult, and it's going to manifest in different ways, in annoyance, and you're just going to be annoyed. You're going to hate the sound of my voice or the sound of whoever's voice will be on this podcast. You're going to feel some kind of way. You're going to want to argue. You're going to want to fight. Whenever we are being asked to unlearn, to take off what is familiar, we will have a reaction, and it's going to be really emotional. But if you are somebody who is on the growth path and is committed to your growth, this is going to be the best thing for you. Paying attention to the things that trigger you is the fastest way to growth. It is the most expedient way to growth. And I love it when my clients are dating somebody who really kind of brings out the emotions and fires them up really a lot in the emotional space, because it helps me read them more, and allowing them to walk through that pain and through that confusion is really what gives them the growth and the energy shifts that they need to create the love they crave and deserve, and to also attract it. And so one of the things that we must learn when we are unlearning is that we are going to be triggered. It's going to be absolutely painful. But instead of running away from the feeling, we need to lean into that feeling. We need to lean into that pain, and we need to be curious, right? We need to be curious about, why does this really annoy me, and develop critical introspection and critical thinking around thoughts that may not sit well with us, or ideologies that don't sit well with us, because it doesn't mean that it will be true for you, but it may move the needle just about enough to bring you to a place of balance. And we will have a lot of triggering conversations in this series, because it is absolutely essential that we have the difficult conversations. We have, any relationship. I say this to my clients all the time: if you're going to have a healthy relationship with anything or anyone, you must become accustomed to having difficult conversations. Difficult conversations are very much how relationships thrive. If you're with a healthy person, then having a difficult relationship can be the best thing in your life, because it will mean that you will get exactly and precisely what you crave in a relationship. So we are going to create a relationship here that is going to open the door to the Black Swan life. The Black Swan life is the life that is unusual, the life that is uncommon, the life everybody wants, but is not prepared to do what it takes. If you want to be a Black Swan, if you want to be the exception to the rule, if you want to be the one that breaks generational programming that is limiting, if you want to be the one that becomes the first millionaire, or the first influence, or the first anything great in your family and in your life and in your society and your community, then that is the Black Swan life, because chances are the odds are against you, and you need to be that Black Swan, that phenomenon, that anomaly that happens in the world. And that is the Black Swan life. And we do things the hard way. Here at the Black Swan life, we face the hard stuff, and we have the difficult conversations. And so you're welcome to come and join us here. The second thing that I want us to really think about is understand, how did you learn these things? Part of how we learn things is down to often it's subconscious. Much of how we learned things was, we were brought up in the atmosphere. We picked it up in our brains, took snapshots of reality, in inverted commas, and made up stories for us to build our lives upon, because the infant mind does not understand the world at large, but it does understand the atmosphere of its home, the beliefs of its home, the programming, the culture. So understanding that much of what you have learned and held to be true, you didn't learn that explicitly. Much of it was implicit. You caught it in the atmosphere. You weren't taught it, but you caught it. You embraced it as true with no questioning, because the things that we learn implicitly often don't get to go through the processing of our conscious mind. They tend to just be received as truth on a very subconscious level, and we automatically go to building on that when it's not actually the reality. So we have to really look at, how did I learn this, and where did I learn this, and why did I learn this? How did I find myself there? Because understanding the origins of anything, for me personally, is really where the growth starts. Finding the origins allows you to deal with the roots. Sometimes we can know that we believe this thing and it's broken, but if we don't sort of excavate it, beyond the soil down to the ground, we're not able to unplug the roots. And the roots usually are the kind of emotions that are intricately weaved into the belief, that make it difficult for us to escape that limiting belief. Because and even when we take away the plant of that belief, or the symptoms of that belief, the root is still strong, and so it eventually flares up. So really, excavating to the, digging to the root, to the very tip of the root, is really important. It's really important to know where you learned that, because that's going to be really, really important. Because often I have found that we learn things and we hold on to them, and we enmesh our emotions and entangle our emotions into certain things. And those certain things often are, the things that feel most familiar, that came from familiar sources, which is usually our primary caregivers or our teachers, places and people that felt familiar, felt safe, and therefore we naturally bypassed the conscious processing that we would have ordinarily done. If we'd been taught something by a stranger that we didn't trust, then we're going to process different. But often we're taught these things from people that feel safe, and so to dismantle that feels like a betrayal to them. It feels like a betrayal to self, and I learned, and after my divorce I realized that much of how I was doing life I'd been taught through religion, through the school system in Zimbabwe at the time, that was very Christian based, which I appreciate in so many ways for so many reasons. But I'd learned a lot of these things implicitly. No one had really sat me down to teach me these things. And I'd learned some of these things from sermons in churches and kind of from the atmosphere, really. And I needed to really kind of drill down to, where did I learn this? Where did I learn this about relationships? Where did I learn this about money? Where did I learn this about faith, God, my relationship with God? Where did I learn this about parenting? Where did I learn this about sex? I had to really kind of excavate, and I am still excavating. I'm still unlearning, and I believe I will be learning and unlearning simultaneously for the rest of my life, because even newfound information, the more you dig and the more you excavate, you realize that wasn't the full story either, and that there is a balance, and that there is, I have to kind of take that piece out and throw that away and unlearn that so that I can learn this other piece, and eventually it all comes together. And so we have to realize and be able to sort of go and dig a little bit deep and say, look, where is the familiar point? Where's the familiarity aspect to what I learned? Who taught that to me? And really just write that down in a journal and say, okay, I learned about money, da, 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 da. Who taught that to me? What atmosphere was I in that allowed me to learn those things? The next thing is, okay, now that I learned that, what is the outcome of that belief? When I was learning about sex, it was wait till you're married, because when you're married, God is just going to put his God sprinkles on it. And it doesn't matter who you marry, as long as you wait till you're married and you do the right thing by God, then what God is going to do is on your wedding day, they're going to do special prayers and special whatever. And God is going to sprinkle that relationship with magic dust. And you're going to have like mind-blowing sex for the rest of your marriage. Like, hello, is going to be mind-blowing. And so, when that was not my reality, it shook my world in half. I felt duped, robbed. And, that now that I'm so much older, I realized that it wasn't really about him and his performance, but really about the hangups that I had, the walls that I had, the switches that I had, the mentalities that I had. And we're going to explore that as we discuss sex on this podcast and in the academy, because that is a conversation that will take a whole season. And I really want to treat it well and give it the respect that it deserves. But again, I had to sort of think, okay, what's the fruit from that belief? The fruit from that belief is that I am completely dysfunctional, right? So it can't be true, because you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. So it can't be true. If what I learned in the atmosphere, in religion, at home, or wherever I learned this is true, then it should yield the results accordingly. And so that's what allows us to know what we do need to work on, when there's a massive disparity between the belief itself, the teaching around that thing, and the results. And I realized that I was dysfunctional sexually in so many ways. Even though I got married a virgin, I had so much more dysfunction beyond that it was not, a complete lie, but it was definitely an untruth. It was definitely, does God bless things that we do right? Yeah, there's an inherent blessing in doing things an ideal way. But in so doing, that blessing does not mean that you can do something in an ideal way from the wrong place and the wrong position and still be blessed. It's still going to be broken, right? So what I want you to do is identify the outcomes. If what I know about money is true, why am I broke? If what I know about money is true, why can't I make the kind of money that I want to make? If what I know about sex is true, why don't I enjoy it? Or why don't I feel like I get enough of it? Or whatever it is, sort of really look at the symptoms of brokenness in your life. And then when you realize that it's not serving you, then your mind can begin to open up to perhaps a way that could serve you. And and the unlearning process becomes easier. And then I want you to dismantle it piece by piece. Don't try and eat an elephant in a day. Dismantle that piece by piece. And how do we do that? Like I said earlier, if this belief is true, then this should be the outcome. So what is the belief? So you outline the actual belief. The belief is that if I wait, waiting looks like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, then God will give me A, B, C, and G. So what piece of this belief is off, is wrong? Is the whole belief off? Or, especially if you are Christian and you believe in this, in the truth of God's word, and he says, wait on the Lord and be of good courage and you strengthen your heart, or those who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. At this point, you have to ask yourself, so what piece of waiting on God is wrong? Because it seems like it's a good thing. And for me, part of that realization was that my understanding of the wait was more about be passive in this area of your life and God will do the rest. But that wait had nothing to do with passivity. It was about, being active in the areas that you do have control over and letting the pieces that you have no control over manage themselves in certain instances. So I realized that, I could still hold the belief, but it was my understanding of that belief that was broken. Okay, this is what I mean by dismantle it, like clearly outline what is the belief and what piece of this belief am I missing? Is it the paradigm? Is it the positioning? Is it my understanding of each word? And what else could it possibly be? And that really is about being open and willing to look at every belief. And once we take something away, we need to replace it with something else, because our brains do not like vacuums. Neither does the earth, and neither does the universe, and neither does God, because if you leave a vacuum, something will fill it. Okay. And we want to make sure that we fill it with ideas and thoughts and understandings that are superior, with a nudge and a thought of, okay, so so many women that I work with who are single are like, and even those who are married, I'm praying for my marriage to work, but that's just leaving things in a vacuum. The things that you have to do to make the marriage work, there's a position you need to take. Same thing with a lot of single women that are waiting on God to bring a husband, and vice versa, single men who are waiting on God to bring a woman. It's really about, are you in a position where you are actively doing what is your responsibility to do, and not just sitting passively waiting for God to knock on your door and drop the gift, right? And above all, I want us to seek balance. In this podcast, we're going to be talking about a lot of untruths, and a lot of breaking down a lot of ideas that we have believed, that we've been taught. We're going to be really challenging ourselves, each other. And I want you to know that, whatever you do, seek balance. We don't want to veer to extremes, because God isn't in the extremes. I have said this before, and I say to my coaches, and I say to anyone who cares to listen, that God is in the balance. God is in the middle of the extremes. You're more likely to find God in the middle than you will at either side of any debate or any argument, because the truth is God's property. The rest of us only have the privilege of seeking it out. And I believe that by listening to one another and understanding not only the words, but the heart behind and the intention, because communication is way deeper than just the words coming out of our mouths, or even body language. Communication is really, as you can borrow down to intention. We can borrow down to the truth of the energy behind what we are saying. And what I would love for us to do is be open-hearted and open-minded to things that maybe you haven't heard before, or ideas that may challenge what you have held true for so long, and really kind of urge yourself towards balance, urge yourself towards regulating yourself, and not sort of holding on to this extreme views. And, you know, we live in an internet age where people refuse to accept balance. People follow a particular leader, and that person almost becomes a cult follower, because the more extreme the view, the more tantalizing, the more exciting, and the easier it is to just hold on to one perspective because it kind of feels safe, rather than listen and think, okay, so would that hold true for me? Would that hold true for my life? Would that hold true for my situation? And what do I need to dismantle to add this new piece of information, to really come to a place of understanding? So today, that's your first episode, is with us really going into the unlearning that we have to do in every area of our life, so that we can have the Black Swan life, that amazing life, and we can create that life together as a community and truly become a city that is set upon a hill. I really want to thank you for watching today's episode. You are all that and a bag of chips plus the dip. You are my amazing Black Swans. Men and women are welcome right here. And I am so excited to hear your feedback, and make sure you leave a comment and download and do all the great stuff that we need to do, and share this podcast with anyone who cares to hear. And in the meantime, I will see you again on the next show. In the meantime, take care of you. Love you lots. Bye-bye now.
Well done for coming to the end of this video. What I want to ask you is, what have you learned? What is your takeaway? And what are you going to start practicing right away? Those 3 things are how you are going to get the best out of every class here at the Black Swan Relationship Academy. Please put it in the comments so that we can all have a look. So I can have a look, the coaches can have a look, and I promise you, we read every comment. We may not be able to reply to every comment, but we read all of your comments, and we want to see how you are growing. And we will see you on the next video.